Disregarding my unappealing appearance and history of misfortune, my life can be summarized. I was betrayed by a colleague, leading to my demotion, and even my newlywed wife abandoned me. The one mocking my predicament is my attractive boss at this new, lower-ranking position. Stunned like a deer caught in headlights, she whispered to me. This was the first time her unexpected words left me perplexed. My name is Jason, a 28-year-old event planner. I recently got married, no longer a single man. With this new commitment, I believed I had my life in order. But then, an incredible incident occurred. Who requested the champagne for tomorrow's event? We're short. Aren't you mistyping the number? My boss's booming voice echoes through the office. This event I'm overseeing involves enjoying champagne and wine at a city park. I was the assistant in charge of this event. Let me check the order form. As I hurried towards my boss, he frowned at me. He struggles to work with me. Looks play a crucial role in how others perceive us, accounting for a significant portion of first impressions. Regrettably, I was endowed with a rather stern-looking countenance, often mistaken for an expression of anger. Furthermore, my stature surpassed the typical preference, adding to the impression of an imposing figure. My boss, in particular, finds my presence intimidating, and I now approach him with a sense of urgency and desperation. For a brief moment, my boss appeared ready to flee. There was my signature on the order form, but I had not reviewed this document beforehand. Initially, I was excluded from the champagne order. I was at a loss for words. One of my senior colleagues, smirking, called out to me, "You really messed up this time, didn't you? What are you going to do about it?" Despite the critical situation, he was grinning from ear to ear. That's when it dawned on me. I remembered that the person in charge of ordering was my senior. My senior and boss began to whisper amongst themselves. This was not a good sign. My senior is well-liked and has a good standing with our boss. My boss perceives me differently than others, as he dislikes me. I checked with Robert. "Jason, it was your mistake after all." My boss's face turned red with anger as he grabbed my collar. This was to be expected. This was the biggest event of the season. "It's not my fault," I said. I was removed from the wine team. No one cared to listen to my words. Robert kept smirking, looking at me. If he has time to laugh, he should do something. The big day is here, so I've made the choice to reach out to all the wholesale alcohol providers. No matter what I say, I'll likely be held responsible. I almost let out a deep breath, but there's no time for that. I need to do as much as I can with the little time I have left. The event's champagne arrived early in the morning, a true stroke of luck. A supplier I had a good rapport with reached out to liquor companies beyond our local area to help me. Those familiar with this phrase I've been using since college days would understand. Exhausted, I mumbled to myself as I dozed off at my desk. One by one, I could sense my coworkers filing in. They were all amazed to see the delivered champagne. In my drowsy state, I heard Robert's voice. "It's a breeze when I handle it. I can fix my junior's silly errors in a flash." Seemingly unaware of my dozing, he boasted as if he had single-handedly solved everything. My colleagues also expressed their admiration. True to form, Robert's charming looks, eloquent speech, and pleasant demeanor had clearly contributed to his success in life. "Are you napping while Robert's working hard?" Suddenly, I was yanked awake by the back of my neck, my boss gripping my collar, his face twisted in anger. I was promptly summoned to the director's office. Responsible for this blunder, I felt utterly irritated, glimpsing the self-satisfied expression of Robert from the corner of my vision. The message conveyed to me in the manager's office was a relocation to a remote branch. In simpler terms, a step down. However, I recently tied the knot. This poses a challenge. My voice came out involuntarily. I've only been married for 6 months, and my wife is working too. She would also be troubled by a sudden transfer. Do I look like I care about your personal problems? Reflect on the harm you were about to cause the company at your new location. Fix that attitude too. My boss was now calling the new location my demotion openly. A transfer order was thrown at me. The destination was a small branch in a seaside town. I've been demoted from my subleader position as well. My salary will likely decrease accordingly. After leaving the director's office, I immediately sent a message to my wife. I didn't have the courage to tell her directly. However, she didn't reply immediately. A week after that incident, I found myself in the town of my demotion. It was near the sea, with the scent of the tide in the air. In the end, my wife left me just 6 months into our marriage. She made it clear to me when I got demoted. She couldn't quit her job, and she married me because I was earning well. It seems I'm no longer needed as I've lost that value. I heard later that she had been involved with someone else before our marriage. My demotion was a convenient excuse for her to leave. You never know what life will throw at you. And now, at this new workplace, I have to start from scratch. The first time I showed up at work, everyone looked at me as if they were terrified. The towering man of 6'7", with a harsh gaze, just disappeared. I knew the reaction was justified, but it still hurt. I may look intimidating, but I'm not one for fights. I can't boast about my strength, and I hate conflicts. Apparently, I seem cold to others, and they tend to keep their distance from me. This has been the case since my student days, and it hasn't changed since I started working. Those who get to know me well trust me, but few people make it that far. The new office clerk is a young girl, and she seems to be constantly scared of me. My other colleagues also treat me like I'm a delicate, touchy subject. There was only one person who treated me without any discrimination. That was the branch manager, Miss Lisa Richardson. She was an astonishingly beautiful woman. I was so stunned at first that I just stared at her. She always had her long hair loosely tied up and wore heels. Her lipstick was always red. She looked both pure and strong. 2 beauty spots lined up under her left eye, and when she smiled, her eyes narrowed in a way that was really charming. On top of that, she was a perfect beauty who was great at her job. She was particularly kind to me. I'm not being conceited. She really was especially kind to me. If I was eating alone, she would always invite me into the lunch group. If I was quiet, she would bring up various topics, trying to bridge the gap between me and the other colleagues. With her help, I quickly adapted to the workplace. It became more comfortable for me than the main office. People are not as they appear, she would tell our coworkers and people in the community while introducing me. In this world setting, it's essential to build relationships with the local residents. From small to large events, our company seemed to handle almost all of them. The office clerk told me that every group we worked with became a regular customer. Recently, I've even received fish from a local lady or dishes for dinner. In return, I get asked to do various things, like cleaning high places or changing light bulbs. For the summer dance festival, we're counting on you to take the lead, Jason. Lisa said to me once I'd really settled into the local community. It appears to be conducted in collaboration with local elementary schools and community associations. I would probably be interacting with even more people than I am now. I wondered, can I really handle such a crucial role? I wondered if I could handle such an important role. I'm anxious about making a bad impression on people I meet for the first time. I don't want to put my coworkers, who have been so kind to me, in a tough spot. It was those colleagues who encouraged me when I was unable to respond right away. It's all right, we've got your back, they all reassured me. I had never been treated so gently before, and I almost found myself tearing up. It's all thanks to Lisa. When I look at her, she's perched ever so elegantly on a desk, legs crossed, smiling. The heel caught on her toes, swaying left, a strong impression. Lisa usually appears prim and proper, but sometimes odd gaps in her character show. She can be surprisingly rough around the edges or use crude language. Even though low heels would make her work easier, She always wears high stilettos. But these heels look cooler, don't they? Was her response when I asked why. It somehow felt familiar, but I couldn't recall where I heard it before. As the day of the dance festival approached, the office began to bustle. One day, a local police officer from the substation attached to the office dropped by. He was deeply engrossed in a conversation with Lisa. Overhearing their discussion, it seemed there were some suspicious people around recently. There was an incident where a great scholar was approached by a man with a sinister look who tried to get the child into his car. As soon as I heard sinister look, I knew I was the one under suspicion. Lately, I've been helping local elementary school kids build floats for the parade. Apparently, some of the parents have named me as the unsavory-looking man. Just as I was sighing in exasperation, a man burst into the office with a force that seemed to keep the front door open. He was the president of the Elementary School Parent-Teacher Association. As soon as he spotted me, he approached. "You're preying on the children under the pretense of preparing for the dance festival. You're the worst person." He yelled at me and grabbed my collar. It seems his daughter got hurt. She had a scraped knee yesterday. He was treating me like a complete pervert. He continued to berate me for being ill-natured, unfriendly, and unmarried. I had nothing to say to him. Arguing back in situations like this is futile. I decided to stay silent. "Oh, officer, if you're here, arrest this man immediately." The president twisted my arm and tried to thrust me at the officer in the back with such strong force. Twisting my arm, I couldn't help but let out a cry of ouch. In an instant, the president's hand was knocked away with great force. The one who knocked it away was Lisa. While glaring at the president, she tried to hide me behind her back. There was a height difference between us, so I was not hidden at all. "What do you think you're doing to my subordinate? Stop making unfounded accusations without any evidence." The firmness and conviction in Lisa's words seemed to overwhelm the president. At the time, his daughter was supposedly harmed. I was at the float-making site, surrounded by a bunch of kids. Lisa and other colleagues were at the site too. Even so, this man with his criminal-looking appearance, the president, kept ranting, despite the odds turning against him, making Lisa lose her cool. I believe judging people by their looks is questionable. Just then, from the entrance of the municipal office, we could hear the children's voices saying, "That's right. It's not right." It seemed they were worried about me not showing up for the float-making time and came to the office to fetch me. The children explained my innocence to the president earnestly and started crying, asking him not to bully me. At this, even the president seemed utterly perplexed and scratched his head. "I'm sorry. I lost my cool." He immediately bowed his head and apologized to me. The children looked up at me. I gave them a reassuring smile and said, "It's okay." They seemed relieved, stopped crying, and started to smile. We made up. They seemed happy. That evening, the real culprit was quickly arrested. The culprit was a young man from the next town over who bore a striking resemblance to me. "Why did you stand up for me?" "I could have been the criminal, you know." When we were left alone due to overtime work, I asked Lisa. I'd appreciated that she believed in me, but there was a feeling that she understood everything about me, which was deeply intriguing. What did she know about me, I wondered. Maybe she was a bit inclined to pick a fight. Suddenly faced with my baseless accusation, Lisa stared at me dumbfounded. Then she broke into a gentle smile. With her heels clicking, she made her way over and stood next to my desk. "Did you really forget about me?" She leaned in and whispered, causing my heart to race. Lisa reached out and propped up my chin. She looked straight into my eyes. It was my first time. "Will you remember if I do this?" Slowly, her hands reached out towards my petrified face. Instinctively, I squeezed my eyes shut. The next moment, my cheeks were being pulled with an unbelievable force. What are you doing?" My words were distorted as my cheeks were being pulled from both sides. Lisa chuckled. "Come on, remember it." As she said this, she extended her hand in front of me. A large silver ring was on a finger that was usually bare. The moment I saw it, my memory center kicked into high gear. This ring. What? This ring. It's the one I gave you, right? Lisa watched me, grinning at my surprise. This ring was my first gift for a girl when I was still in middle school. I frequently visited a bookstore where a girl worked. Though I say girl, she must have already been in college. The first time I saw her in the bookstore, I was surprised by how beautiful she was. While I was frequenting the bookstore just to see her, I noticed she was being avoided by the other employees. Perhaps I noticed it because I was facing similar isolation at school. When I listened to the conversations between the employees, it seemed the reason was simply because she was beautiful. Just petty jealousy among women. Short black hair and multiple piercings, her nails were always painted black. Apparently, they didn't like her style. I thought about how tough it must be for her. One day, right before closing, I really wanted to read a book, so I dashed into the bookstore. In the corner of the nearly closed shop, she was crouched down, looking for something. Are you looking for something? I mustered up my courage and spoke to her, which seemed to surprise her. As she stood up, her eyes filled with tears as she looked at me. It was an image I still remember. It made my heart pound. I lost my ring. Indeed, the silver ring she usually wore was missing from her finger. She told me it was a gift from her brother. There was no one else in the store. Silently, I crouched down on the floor and started to help her look for it. In the end, we didn't find the ring. She bowed her head to me and thanked me. I was frustrated that we couldn't find it, but I was happy to have shared that time with her. The next day, when I went to the bookstore, she was not there, and the usual group that spoke ill of her was. I was speechless at what the leader of the group was loudly boasting about. She was proudly talking about how she had thrown the girl's silver ring into the river. Apparently, the leader's boyfriend fell for the girl, and that was the cause. Talk about spiteful. Feeling sorry for her after she searched so hard, I spent all my savings and bought a ring for the first time in my life. Later, when she was at the cash register, I slipped the ring onto her finger. In the midst of the chaos, I clearly remember that I was so flustered that I put it on her left ring finger. Her surprised face with wide eyes and the face of Lisa, who was laughing in front of me now, overlap in my memory. You were the first one to put a ring on my left ring finger, I said. Jason, leave. Lisa apparently noticed me at the company induction ceremony. She found out my department, my name, and while she thought of speaking to me someday, many years passed by. When it was decided that I was to be transferred here, she was so delighted that she even danced a little jig. No way, I became somewhat embarrassed and couldn't look at Lisa's face. But one thing became clear to me. Having been judged based on my appearance and feeling hurt by it, I realized that she understood my feelings. She had been sympathizing with me all along. So is this ring valid, or was it just a coincidence? Lisa tells me that after that, I became too embarrassed to go to the bookstore, but she had been waiting for me all along. I was surprised when you crawled around on the floor, so earnestly looking for the ring for her. Ever since then, I've been concerned about you. I couldn't recognize Lisa, who had a completely different atmosphere from her student days, but talking like this, she hasn't changed at all from that time. Of course it's valid. Lisa grinned satisfactorily at my response. I guess I won't be able to win against her, but I feel like we can be together forever because we understand the same kind of pain. Next time, I'll propose with a proper ring. I made the declaration while shyly looking away. Lisa bursts into laughter and says, I'm looking forward to it. What did you think of that? Subscribing to the channel would be a great motivation for me to create more content. See you in the next video.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.